Iris, I can't talk to you now.
I saw your message in the paper.
Huh? What? Who is this?
I saw your message in the paper. I'm calling as instructed. I'm a creep.
So, what is a creep? I mean, how would you define a creep? Is it a person, a place, a thing? More so, can it define an entity? Is it a human? Or is it something much, much, much worse? Pseudo-philosophy aside, Ricky Beamer was able to answer that question when late one night he got a few mysterious phone calls. Mysterious phone calls that would lead him down a very interesting road. That's right. The episode we're going to be covering tonight is Calling All Creeps.
Meet Ricky Beamer, and yes, that is his name, Ricky Beamer. He's a dorky sort of fella who's had just about enough of getting pushed around at school, whether if it's from bullies, teachers, or the stuck-up little princess running the school newspaper, Tasha McLean. The latter here being the target for Ricky's late-night escapades. He's fed up with her bossiness. And now, it's time for revenge.
That's her, the editor of our school newspaper. I work on the paper, but she never lets me do a story. She always calls me a creep.
He waits in the darkness for Tasha and one of the school teachers to leave. Once they do, Ricky makes his move. Leaving a very obvious trail to a nearby terminal, he puts his plan into action.
Calling all creeps. Calling all creeps. If you're a real creep, call Tasha McLean at 555-0109. After midnight.
Just as he's about to finish, Tasha and the teacher return to the computer lab, and Ricky narrowly makes his escape and runs off into the night.
Oh, it was nothing, Miss Richards.
The next day at school, we meet Ricky's personal bullies.
Well, well, well. If it isn't Ricky the Rat.
What the fuck is this music?
Breathe on him, Wart.
These absolute freaks hassle Ricky the worst, but are far from the only ones, as Ricky happens to be the school's punching bag. Why, you may ask? I don't know, he looks like a dork, I guess. In all forms of media, looking even slightly dorky is a bully magnet. The fact that Ricky himself is rather submissive in nature doesn't really help the fact either, as in this scene we see him get goaded into singing Mary Had a Little Lamb, and the whole school laughs at him because that's just what's funny in Canada. Oh, kids can be so cruel.
Mary had a little lamb, his fleece as white as snow.
Thankfully for Ricky, he knows all the lyrics, and also a teacher comes by and clears the hallway for him. It's here where Ricky meets Iris, a new girl at school who hasn't been brainwashed by the masses to think that Ricky is a loser. She treats him with kindness, something he hadn't expected or experienced from anyone until just now. So Ricky decides to repay the kindness by showing Iris around the school to get her accustomed to things. He gives her the lowdown on what to eat and what not to eat at the school luncheon, like not eating the tuna surprise.
It's the tuna surprise. No one eats the tuna surprise.
Unfortunately, he only ends up getting embarrassed later on when one of the school bullies trips him in the cafeteria. Of course, the entire school thinks this is an absolute riot, and Ricky runs away upset. Iris isn't fazed by this and still tries to comfort him, and Ricky tries to put all that behind him as he's looking forward to his revenge plans finally coming into fruition that night. We transition to nighttime and see Ricky laying asleep in bed. His phone rings, and jolted awake, he groggily answers it, only to have a somewhat familiar voice on the other side respond.
Hello?
I'm a creep. I saw your message. I'm ready to plant the seeds, ready to rule. When do we meet?
The next morning, Ricky reads the school newspaper, only to see that his original message had changed.
If you're a real creep, call Ricky Beamer.
Turns out that Tasha saw him running away that night and changed the message to be about Ricky instead. I don't know how he expected to get away with that, having left a trail of mud by the computer and not expecting the editor to, edit the newspaper. It's literally in the name. So, unfortunately, it seems that Ricky's plan was a total failure, and Tasha walks away with a smug look on her face. Although not all is bad for Ricky today, as it seems like no one feels like bullying him. It's almost as if he's become invisible. But during lunch, some of the bullies that were harassing him earlier throw him a note.
When will the creeps meet?
Ricky decides to ignore this, and that's when he gets another message. Ricky just thinks this is more bullying from various kids at the school, so I suppose he has a good reason for ignoring it. For all we know, this could just be an everyday occurrence for him. He then runs into Iris again, who invites him out to go shopping for cookies. Of course, Ricky says yes, happily to finally have a friend. Man, what did this kid do to get bullied like this? What, was he one of those weird kids that would sit in the corner of the playground during elementary school and, shove bugs down their throat? Nevertheless, he probably did something embarrassing to get everyone to hate him like this, because that hate doesn't just come out of nowhere. I'm not saying he's an outcast, which is possible, and I've seen happen on many occasions, but this feels a little bit more heavy-handed than that. But as the episode progresses, we'll see there's a good reason for it. Narratively, that is. The next day, Ricky is hiking through the woods to meet with Iris when he's jumped by his 3 personal bullies. They push him into a hollowed tree and surround him. Terrified, Ricky pleads for them to let them go. But then, they do something rather unexpected.
Please, forgive us. We didn't mean to hurt you.
You should have told us sooner. Told you?
We meant you no harm.
We didn't know.
Ricky is understandably confused, but finds that confusion turning to fear once again when the bullies begin to transform. These are the creeps, and man, I hate these designs, and not in the good way. I don't know which episodes came first, but it seems like they've used these same costumes for a couple other episodes in the series, and that is really distracting. I also happen to really enjoy the appearance of the creeps in the Jacobus drawings and various other concept pieces, so seeing this is just very, very disappointing. In this iteration, they look like goofy, tiny little toad people. I mean, at least it's not as bad as the live-action Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but it is up there. They're just too goofy to be scary. The creeps believe that Ricky is their leader, their commander. They make this assumption from the ad on the newspaper. Now that their commander is here, they can finally move forward with their plan to turn everyone in school into a creep, with the magical power of the identity seeds. All they need is the commander's plan to move forward. Ricky, of course, tries to weasel out of it, but they plant the idea in his head of putting the seeds in the school lunch. And so, that's the plan they go with, and Ricky finds himself sneaking into the cafeteria after school, being forced to plant the seeds by his school bullies. Being the commander, you'd think he'd have the ability to order one of the creeps to do the deed, but I guess Ricky just doesn't have the balls and finds himself on the spot here. Besides, I suppose he does need to further prove himself as their commander. Ricky then gets the genius idea to throw the seeds into the tuna surprise because, of course, nobody eats that. As he's pouring the seeds, he gets caught by the cafeteria lunch lady and gets lectured. Ricky makes a break for it before he's force-fed the tuna surprise, and I halfway expected the lunch lady to just take a little taste of the tuna right there. But unfortunately, we didn't get that. Or fortunately for her, I suppose. During lunch, Ricky waits near the trash cans, observing everyone's food choices to be sure they don't get the tuna surprise. To his luck, no one does, except for Iris, who he luckily manages to stop on time. Unfortunately, he manages to piss off his one and only friend, and later on, gets confronted by the creeps, as no one in school was transformed. The creeps get real close to turning on him, as they begin to have their doubts that he is their leader. But thankfully for Ricky, he's got an angel on his shoulders.
Maybe you should reveal the real plan, Commander. Commander Ricky, Sergeant Iris reporting for duty.
Again, what the hell is up with the music here? Sounds like it was taken from a military mobile game I'd play on my phone. Iris comes forward as Ricky's second in command, and bluffs her way into the creeps, giving Ricky a second chance. She also lays down a clear plan for the creeps to move forward with. They can plant the seeds in cookies for the bake sale, and offer them up for free. The creeps accept the plan, and now Ricky, along with Iris, have to find a way to stop it. I was almost thinking to myself that Iris was going to be the real commander all along, but just like in the book, Iris is just a normal human being. A very kind human being. Ricky pulls Iris aside, and they talk about everything that's going on.
Those creeps are real creepy.
I thought that was your name. That is our word. You've got no right using it.
Oh my god, that line was so lame. I can't believe they said that in here. It's just so silly. But the creeps are so silly too, so whatever. Iris and Ricky just decide to wing it, as I guess they don't have any real plan. Take it from me, that's not a good idea, because that's what I tell myself every October. We'll figure it out later, and every year I end up making these videos the day before I'm scheduled to release them. If this whole thing were on my shoulders, I'd probably would have blown it, and I'm getting the vibe that the same thing's gonna happen with you guys here. It's the bake sale now, and the cookies are being passed out. Quick, Ricky, think of a plan to save everyone. You only have a little bit of time left. You really, really shouldn't have slacked off on this, man. He runs up to the stage in a last-ditch effort to save everyone from turning into, well, creeps. But unfortunately, they don't listen to him because, well, he's a dork. Who would listen to him?
Ricky the Rat!
Wait! Listen to me! You don't understand!
Ricky's been pushed around too long, and now it's time for his nerd rage to take its toll on the students of the middle school.
Don't let these stupid kids get to you. Once they eat the cookies, you'll be their ruler.
The ruler?
Of course, they'll be your slaves.
They'll have to do anything you say.
Ricky gets a change of heart and decides that it's about time things changed around here. So he takes a bite from one of the cookies and takes his spot as leader of the creeps. You know, until the real leader of the creeps shows up, which doesn't happen in this episode, but I expect it would happen at one point. And poor Iris. Poor Iris. She's not going to make it out of this. At least I don't think so, because the episode pretty much abruptly ends right there at its highest point. So that was Calling All Creeps, and I thought it was just okay. It's got a lot of that good old classic Goosebumps campiness and charm, but it lacks a lot of the ambience and creepiness that a lot of the other episodes have. The episode overall is a good adaptation, but it feels to me like it loses a lot of the late-night creepiness the first book had. The scenes at night are really short and abrupt, and I feel like those could have been extended to have more of a creepier tone. And as I stated during my synopsis of the episode, the music does not help at all. It is just too goofy. Another gripe I mainly have, and this is both with the episode and the book, is that these things are called creeps, so maybe there should be more hijinks with them at night. As, well, they're creeps, they could be creeping in the shadows, they could be anywhere. We could have gotten a lot of really decent, scary scenes of these creepy, supposed to be lizard people and not toad things, running around at night. Maybe Ricky's running around the streets and nobody wants to help him because he's a creepy, dorky weirdo, you know, something like that. But no, unfortunately, we don't get anything like that, as most of the book and episode take place during the day, and I think that's a real missed opportunity. Just like its main character, the episode is kind of dorky, janky, and 3 times as campy as I'm willing to stand. I also really, really hate the creep designs, but this was a cheap show, so I can't really fault it for that. And Ricky also kind of annoys me, as he's kind of a woe-is-me type of victim kid. I mean, it's not that bad, and I can get over it mostly, and I can imagine a lot of people would sympathize with him, which is reasonable. I just can't, and that might be more of a flaw with myself. The only thing that redeems him in this episode from being mediocre and bland is how he handles the ending, and frankly, that also saves the episode entirely, because the episode was kind of mediocre and bland up until that point. So Ricky finally decides to let the people of the school become his slaves for making fun of him, and it ends with Ricky on top. It's interesting to see a character in Goosebumps go that route, so I really appreciate that. In fact, I appreciate that so much that I would like to see a continuation of this story, actually. Now that Ricky is a creep, what does he do next? Does the real commander ever come into play? Did the identity seeds alter Ricky's personality like it did his fellow students? Because it seems like they go from bullying him to worshipping him, so I'm kind of curious where that went. And what happens to Iris? So many questions that will be forever unanswered. This episode actually kind of reminds me of the film The Faculty. Kind of a similar plot, but makes the smarter choice of not ending at its highest point. I should have done a review on that film as my Monday 5-minute review episode. Crap, talk about missed opportunities. I give Calling All Creeps a 6 out of 10. Closer to a 5 than a 7, and frankly, I've only given it that high of a score because I like the implications of the ending so much. Maybe one day we'll get a sequel, but until then, I'll continue to speculate as to what could have happened.
And that was Calling All Creeps. Well, and so we have another Goosebumps episode over and done with. I was going to cover something else, but this one felt just right being right next to Four Eyes, so I just had to cover it. Anywho, that's going to do it for today's episode, and as always, make sure to stay tuned, and remember to have a scary day.